All right, Chapter 2, Workplace Safety and Wellness. We're going to be talking about some things that are going to help you be prepared mentally and physically to be out there in the world. This job is stressful, and you need to understand that. Your family needs to understand that. But your patients and their families, they may not understand it, and there's going to be some stress that you might be dealing with from your patients, from their families, from you, from your partners and their families, right? And so, because of that, you as an EMR need to be in good physical condition, not only physically, but mentally as well. We need to be mentally prepared for what is going to happen in our career field. We have to understand and avoid unnecessary stress. A little note: stress that's not good is called distress. DIS stress. It's distress. I'm not feeling good about this. Now, there is a positive stress, eustress, EUSTRESS, and that's a positive stress, something that you want to have happen that causes you to be tired. But most of the time, we're going to be talking about distress. The most stressful situations and calls probably going to include a family member or a patient who reminds you of a family member. Very young patients are the Achilles heel of many, and conversely, the very old, especially if they remind you of a grandparent. Critical patients, patients who are severely sick or injured, those could be a cause of stress. And then, of course, death in any form is not really a fun time, if you will. And so we got to be mindful of all these situations and how we can mitigate them. There's also stress caused from danger. Now, I'm not talking about danger as in I could get a cut here or there, but I'm going into a situation where I don't know how it's going to come out, and there's a possibility of severe or even catastrophic injury. Right? We also have violence, right? Someone pulls a gun, someone pulls a knife, or someone's beating on somebody else. Maybe you see or smell or hear something that is very disturbing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be horrific. Maybe the sound of someone throwing up is a clue to you and causes you stress. And then mass casualty incidents. Those are high dollar stressful situations that are career enders. All of these can be career enders, but the mass casualty definitely is one of those times where you're like, this could really be the end of me. So when confronted with stress, not if, but when, you got to do a couple of things. Number one, you've got to recognize, or excuse me, make a conscious effort to prevent unneeded stress, right? So rather than trying to work a double or a triple shift in a row or whatever, reduce that stress. Go, you know what? That's not good for my body. It's not good for my potential patients. Uh, I'm gonna uh, I'm gonna change my ways, right? We have to understand what those signs and symptoms look like in us and in other people. That might mean we need to start exercising or changing what we eat. And it is okay to seek out additional help from licensed individuals in the matters of the mind. We also have grief reaction triggers. So we have to, number one, we have to understand the stress and how to prevent it. But then once those triggers are activated, then how can I take and mitigate these things as well? Some grief reaction triggers, obviously a death of a loved one, major trauma, serious illness, drug or alcohol, right? Maybe, and this is at least for the high schoolers, end of a relationship, man, they lose their minds. But divorce or rejection could also be grief triggers. Obviously, loss of a job is very stressful as well. So, lots of things here that we need to think about. Now, when we think about these things, think about the 5 stages of death and dying. These are stress reactions that happen in the face of catastrophic illnesses or injuries, right? And I'm going to pause right here. We're going to talk about this for a few minutes because it's imperative that you know these things, because it's something. These steps, these phases, if you will, these stages are something that could happen in the order you see it, or maybe you bounce back and forth. And if you are the one that's dealing with the person having these reactions, you need to understand what each one is and how to deal with it. So before we go further, I have a little video for you.
It's no big deal. It's probably not even quicksand. I'm gonna have a good laugh about this tonight with the guys. Well, this is just perfect. Stupid quicksand, stupid jungle. I want to bite someone in the face. Mother. Ah, that stupid jungle. Are you there, God? It's me, Giraffe. Listen, if you would just give me a mulligan on this quicksand thing, I promise, no more peeing on your shorter creatures. But you get a deal? You know something? I'm cool with this. I bet heaven has all the tender leaves I can eat, and everyone gets their own Slurpee machine. Yeah, take me, sweet death. I await your loving embrace. What? I think I hit the bottom.
So a fun little video. You could just go to YouTube and search for Greek giraffe, and that'll give you the same thing. But let's talk about them real quick. Denial. A person is not believing that it's happening. Right? This can't be happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. It's not going to go. It's not just a river in Egypt, right? These people are in total denial of whatever is happening, right? Typically, from denial, you probably move into some form of anger. Now, again, you may or may not progress through these in order. Maybe you jump around. Maybe you don't hit all the stages, but these are some of the things that we need to be aware of. Anger. That's a normal response to stress. However, the irrationality of it, they may be angry at you simply because you're an easy target. You're the one that's there that doesn't belong in this group, even though they called you, and there could be some anger towards you. Got to be ready for that. Bargaining. When a person will say, take me, God, instead of them, or let me first do this before I die, or any of these things that happen, that's a bargaining chip, right? Especially with those that are not really prepared to hear the truth. They're still kind of in a denial state, and they're moving out of that, and they're like, well, if I could only see my child graduate from high school, if I could only see my grandchild born, or if I could only walk one more time on the top of the mountain, whatever it is, there's a bargaining that tries to go on there. There is a point where there is some depression, and basically what happens then is the patient retreats inside themselves and just kind of maybe stares at a wall, won't get out of bed, whatever else. You might even say this from the patient or the patient's family. But there comes a point where there is a moment of acceptance. Hopefully, there's a moment of acceptance, and that could be almost as dangerous. They may just, I don't care what happens, and so off they go, right? But I understand If I'm the patient, I understand that I'm going to die and there's really nothing I can do about it. So why worry, right? So those are kind of the stages that we're talking about when we talk about normal reactions to stress. Now, how do I recognize stress? Well, outside of this is things that happen outside the norm. Because if someone is a cranky butt to start with, how are you going to recognize that they're irritable, right? So first you need to know their baseline. But irritability is one of those main things, a crankiness, right? A stress that is going on. I'm cranky, and I don't care who knows about it. I can't concentrate. All of a sudden, a squirrel, and you're off for like, do you smell that? And then, what was that? And they just can't focus in. Their normal disposition. They're normally happy-go-lucky, and they are just stone cold Steve Austin. Or maybe they're normally no affect. They don't show any emotion, and all of a sudden they're happy and they're joking around or whatever else. Uh, Difficulty sleeping and nightmares. That's bad. Anxiety, indecisiveness, guilt. These are things that kind of start piling up one on top of another. Loss of appetite, loss of interest in the hibbity dibbity, brown chicken, brown cow, that kind of thing. Loss of interest in work. I don't care. I'm not going. They start isolating themselves. They start feeling hopeless. They really start hitting the wacky tobacco or the goofy juice. Any of those things. Um, and then maybe they have actual pain or discomfort in their body manifested not from an actual problem, but it's a psychosomatic reaction. So how do we prevent stress? Well, there's tons of literature out there. There's tons of ideas that are good ideas and good and proven methods. Number one is to, not gorge yourself on sweets and alcohol, right? But to eat a balanced diet. There's all kinds of. I'll leave this up there for a few minutes. I'll stop talking and you can just look at that. But this is some recommendations. Or actually, I'll let you pause it. I want to keep moving. Uh, how to eat properly. Okay. Drink some water. Drink appropriate amounts of water. Not caffeinated drinks. We're not going to start pounding the coffee 3 or 4 pots a day. We're not going to start drinking the Red Bulls. We're not going to start drinking fifths of whiskey and vodka and everything else. You have to be balanced, and you have to keep your body in balance. Spend time with family and friends. Even if seeing them causes you to remember the call, you need to spend time with friends and family and speak and get it outside. You hold that in, it'll be like a pressure cooker, and with no relief valve, pressure cooker can explode. Maybe you need to get some hobbies that are not job related. Maybe you need to start exercising. How about meditation? And people think that that's a funny way of saying it. What do you want me to sit with my legs crossed and fingers pinched and sing om, om? Well, if that helps, sure. Uh, what doesn't work is sitting and watching TV. Binge watching TV. It doesn't really allow. It just pauses you from where you are. It doesn't allow you to progress and get through the stress. It just puts a pause on the stress, and you have to pick that back up afterwards. And then, of course, if that doesn't work, hey, get some professional help. That professional help, you need to trust that they're not going to be judgmental. And in fact, when there is a bad call that goes out, your leadership should activate the CISD teams so that it's critical incident stress debrief, the management system. Its purpose is to help people work through the most horrific calls of their careers. All right, so now let's talk about crew resource management. And what we're talking about with crew resource management is how are we going to deploy our team members. Right? and it's going to help us to understand what's going on in a developing and high-paced situation. Because we all know that in EMS, it's never a calm thing. It's easy for errors to occur, especially if we're not able to focus in on whoever's in command. So, to mitigate that, if we believe that there's a potential problem or immediate problem, and the team leader needs to focus in, they can use the acronym PACE. Probe. I'm going to try to figure out, I'm going to look, I'm going to listen, I'm going to ask to confirm what the problem is as I come in. Hey, someone tell me what's going on here, right? Excuse me. I'm going to be alert. I'm going to communicate to the team leader if and when I see a problem coming up, right? I want to make sure that they're not ignorant of what I see coming on, because maybe their back's turned, or maybe they can't hear what's going on, or maybe you're talking to a family member outside in another room, or whatever. We also have to, as team members, be willing to challenge what the leader is saying, because we don't want to be part of something that's being done wrong. If the issue is not being corrected, then clearly we need to possibly change whoever the leader is. And that is, it goes for taking care of the scene, but maybe patient care as well. And then, quite frankly, if we get onto an emergency where the problem is clear and critical, we need to just communicate that there's an emergency and back up immediately. Get right out of there, okay? Some of the things that we're going to be dealing with is workplace safety. You're going to encounter a variety and a wide variety of hazards at emergency scenes, from chihuahuas to llamas to broken glass and barbed wire and crushed vehicles and blah 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 blah. You need to be able to recognize what the hazards are and overcome them, and to say, you know what, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to go in there, or I need this to take care of this, or whatever. Whatever it is, you need to know what your steps are going to be to minimize the risk to yourself and your crew, then your patients, and then everybody else. Okay. Your priority is you going home at the end of the day. And so with that, you have to make some decisions. But along with that, you have to recognize as well that this job is got some inherent risks. We need to mitigate those and be ready for what's coming next, if you will. So some infectious diseases of concern, things that we've got to be careful of while we're working out there as EMRs. We've got to be very cognizant of these things. There's bacteria, there's viruses, there's fungus, and all of this stuff can cause illness in us, and we don't want that, right? They can be spread from one person to another, and this is the stuff that we learned back in kindergarten. Wash your hands, don't be licking other people's noses, that type of thing, right? And we need to protect ourselves from this, right? We've got lots of different things that are icky, right? We have MRSA, COVID, MERS, the flu, H1N1, AIDS, hepatitis, and TB. All these things are things that we need to be thinking about as we're out there working. How are we going to prevent ourselves from getting that? Well, some of the ways that we pick these things up are direct contact. I touch something. It goes directly into my mucous membranes, right? Someone coughs in my face or spits in my face. We also have the indirect contact with airborne droplets. We learned that one through the COVID season, along with a lot of other things, right? But things in the air, I suck it into my airway and it percolates down there in my lungs. And then, of course, contact with infected blood-borne pathogens, okay? Now, when we talk about direct contact, we're talking about things that have been not cleaned in a while. Most of the time it's staph bacteria. And most of the time this stuff happens in hospitals and dialysis centers and nursing homes and things like this. But how about schools, right? Or public areas that aren't cleaned very well. Also, these diseases attack the weakened immune systems. They're very much the diseases that go after the weak already. Most of the time, MRSA will show up as a skin rash in somebody healthy. Somebody not so healthy, well, now we start degrading into some higher problems. We follow standard precautions when we're talking about MRSA. Gloves, and what is becoming standard, actually it is standard since COVID, is a mask, an exam mask. Doesn't do much, but it makes people feel better. Now, airborne pathogens. Airborne pathogens, those are the ones that could get a little bit more tricky, especially when we talk about the TB, right? TB is once you have it, you're always going to have it. Once you test positive for it, you're always going to test positive for it. And some of these other things, we don't want to be breathing those in and taking them home with us, right? So when we think that we're dealing with an airborne issue, let's throw an N95 on ourselves, and that keeps 95% of the particulates out of our face, right? And anytime there's some coughing or spitting or whatever else, put an N95 or a HEPA mask on yourself, and then put one on the patient as well, all right? So that it keeps all their stuff in towards them. Make sure that you know how to put one of those on appropriately so that you're not actually making it worse for yourself. Now, bloodborne pathogens. These are the little buggers that stay there in what we like to call blood, right? We know the old one from the 90s and early 2000s, the AIDS, and everybody was, if you remember back to that, everybody in the world was going to die from AIDS, and we shouldn't talk to anybody, we shouldn't touch anybody, we shouldn't love anybody. And the AIDS virus, if you will, is very hard to get. It needs a living host. Not that I'm going to go around licking and scraping blood that's on, but just be mindful that in a healthy immune system, you should be okay for a moment or two, right? Hepatitis B, on the other hand, hepatitis C, hepatitis in general, those guys are pretty insidious. They can last for up to a week outside of the body, whereas HIV AIDS only lasts about 10 seconds outside of it. They need a living, breathing body to survive it. Okay? Now, you may not see blood, but you don't know if it's in any of these fluids. A good rule of thumb is if it's wet, sticky, and not yours, don't be playing with it without gloves on. Okay, and especially you want to make sure your mucous membranes are protected, your eyes and your nose and your mouth and any sores that you might have. You don't want to have blood from your patient on your gloves and then playing with your face with your gloves on. Also, if you're exposed, quote unquote, that might mean that you've taken a needle and have been jabbed with a dirty needle or broken glass that has actually been cut into somebody else, right? Think about accident scenes where there's blood and damaged things everywhere, and then you get yourself cut. That's another example of how you might get infected. Some HIV patients don't know that they're infected. They're asymptomatic. Those are few and far between, but they are out there. You should always wear your gloves as a standard precaution. You should not just go, you look okay, because you can't look and see if there's a problem, right? You just have to assume that everybody has got methyl bad stuff, herpencephalitis, I call it. Now, hepatitis B is far more contagious than HIV. We want to make sure that we have our hepatitis B series vaccines. You should have had to have them to go to school. Some of us might be elder enough where we didn't have to have that. Meningitis and syphilis are still both spread out there by contact with contaminated blood. And meningitis as attacking of the meninges, your your sheathing that goes along your spinal cord, right? We want to make sure that we're not taking all that stuff home with us. So what do? Wash your hands. The number one preventative strategy is washing your hands. Let me say it again. The number one preventative measure is wash your hands. Now you do that after you take your gloves off, after you've handled patients. You see, that's just what you do, right? We always wear gloves. And make sure that they're latex or nitrile so that we're not causing any allergic reactions. Masks and eyewear if you think that you're going to have blood spatter or bodily fluid spatters, right? If there's juices like childbirth, man, I'm going to wear a freaking full body isolation suit if I had to go into that. But once we're done with whatever that is, we're going to strip off all of our PPE and wash with soap and water. Okay? Please, for the love of everything holy and dear, do not recap or cut or bend used needles. Just put them in the sharps container and call it a day. Airborne pathogens, just make sure that you're not up in people's grills, that you're not invading your bubble, if you will. Yes, we've all learned quite a bit through this COVID season. Make sure that you have the appropriate PPEs available to you for each call. And if you don't, make sure that you are contacting your supervisor so that you have those available. Stay home if you've got a fever, right? If you're coughing and hacking a lot, make sure that you're wearing a mask, those type of things. Common sense, common practices. We're going to do, in class, we'll do some donning and doffing of PPE. Donning means put on, doffing means to take off. I don't know why they don't just say putting it on, putting it off, but that's the way they do that. And we'll play with some other things as well. Just make sure that whatever you have, gloves, goggles, face masks, they're all in good shape, not torn, not soiled, not gross already. Definitely not wet. Again, we're going to go ahead and do this in class, so you don't have to really worry about that here, but I'll just give you a second to look that over. Immunizations, you're going to want to make sure that you are up to date with current vaccines and current shot records, okay, right? So influenza and COVID shots, you want to make sure you have those for the year. You want your Tdap, tetanus, diphtheria, I can't remember what the A is in pertussis. That should be done at the very minimum every 10 years. Varicella, which is chickenpox, measles, mumps, rubella. You want your MMR vaccine. These things here, you have the anti-vaxxers in just about every situation. But these vaccines keep these monster diseases from resurging. And then TB test is going to be a yearly thing. If you're going to be in the emergency medical field or fire department field, you've got to do it once a year anyway, at least in the state of Michigan. Okay, let's talk about responding to the scene. So we're going to respond safely into the scene, right? So when we respond into the scene, when we're coming onto the scene, you need to make sure that when you're coming on, you're putting your vehicle in the right spot. But as you're going there, you need to make sure that you're being safe and any other person that's going with you is being safe. Because an injured or dead EMR does not help. It actually makes everything worse because now we have to stop and help you and the original reason we were there. When you're driving, always, always, always wear your seatbelt. And anybody that's in your vehicle needs to be wearing their seatbelt. That includes if you wind up driving the ambulance. Are your responders in the back, the EMTs, the paramedics, are they wearing their seatbelts? Because the vehicle should not be in motion if you don't have the seatbelts on. Is the patient on the cot, are they seatbelted in? Now you're going to be dispatched there. Now, most of the time, dispatch is only telling us what they themselves have been told. It's a game of telephone. And sometimes they don't know anything. Because of that, we may not have all the information, especially when it comes to anticipated hazards. However, we can infer things by being just normal thinking humans. During a storm, we can assume that there's tree limbs and debris on the road, right? If they hit a telephone pole, if they say it's been into a power pole, we can assume that there's power lines down. Use your dispatch information in your initial thought processes as you respond into the scene. And again, always make sure you have your seatbelt on and try to get there in the most effective and efficient way as quickly as possible, but safely as possible according to the weather conditions. When you come on scene, make sure that you're placing your vehicle in such a way as to not block the ingress and egress of the ambulance and other emergency vehicles. You want to make sure that your vehicle is protecting the scene. Make sure all your emergency warning lights are working. And when you get out, make sure to check your mirrors to look behind you before you do that. Civilians are not smart creatures. They will run into people because they don't know any better. And yes, we've got plenty of video to back up that statement. Last thing you want to be doing is become a patient yourself. Make sure that when you're working, especially on a roadside, that you are wearing appropriate reflective gear and safety helmets and so forth. If you don't need to be in the traffic, if you don't need to park in a lane, then don't, because that's just creating a hazard out there. So as you come onto the scene, as you've responded in now, we need to start thinking about safety again and our wellness. We need to scan the area carefully to determine what hazards are present and address them in the appropriate order, meaning I'm not going to go storming in there and grabbing the patient up if in fact they're laying in a puddle of gasoline that's on fire, or if they're laying in a puddle of water that has an electrical cord in it. I got to be careful. We also have to make sure someone's controlling traffic, whether that be law enforcement or other EMRs. We need to make sure that we're controlling traffic on the if it's on the roadside, right? And please, 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 if you need more help, call more help. Don't be shy. Better to call more help than you need and disregard them than not call anybody and wind up injured yourself. If this is a violent scene, then you stay out. If you are a trained law enforcement personnel, that's different. But if you're responding as fire department or EMS, if it is a suicide patient or a fist fight or whatever else, your happy rear does not go in there. You are not to proceed in unless called for by law enforcement. Always, always, always play it safe, because we want to help law enforcement, but we want to stay out of their way if they have to do something else, right? If it is a crime scene, we really don't want to be moving things around unless we absolutely have to, because it is evidence, and we don't want to move evidence around. If we have to move something, please make a note of what you moved, where you moved it to, and why, and then tell a law enforcement if time permits. Do not, if there's a crowd, get a feeling for that crowd before you get out of the truck, before you get out of your vehicle. And definitely call for assistance for crowd control. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where an angry mob takes out their frustrations on us. Always keep your eyes roving back to left and right and up. Look up. Is there a broken telephone pole or power pole and the wires are hanging low to the ground? You're going to drive through those wires, right? Because that could cause what we like to call death. We don't want to do that. So be looking for that as well. We also have all of these wonderful little placards that you see here as examples to the right. There's hazardous materials out there. You need to be eyeballing that from a safe distance, at least 100 feet away. And a rule of thumb for anything that you see a placard there, it's called upwind, uphill, upstream. You want to be in all those ups, otherwise it'll be up yours. Okay? We don't do other people's jobs unless we're cross-trained to do that. All right? We're not consumers of electricity. We don't move power lines. We aren't the fire department. We don't put out fires, right? Big fires. I mean, we have fire extinguishers, but we're not going to be running into burning buildings, right? And definitely not going in without some sort of a breathing apparatus. We have to be safe. We have to ensure other people are being safe. If you believe that you're on the scene with a hazardous materials or a fire or these things, you need to make sure that you are staging your vehicle far enough back so that you are not involved yourself, especially if it's a hazmat. Again, we talked about the upwind, uphill, upstream, but one face full of anhydrous ammonia, for example, will cause you to be dead. You don't want that. If you smell anything funky, back out, right? If 4 or 5 people are laying on the ground in the middle of nowhere, that doesn't make sense. Don't proceed in. Look around. Do I see any vehicles teetering? Do I see any trees off kilter in kittywampus? Do I have poles or buildings or cliffs or piles of blah, blah, blah? Do I have anything that's going to cause a potential problem? You've got to pay attention to these things. If we have a patient in a vehicle, we need to have fire stabilize it before we start moving people around. We have to make the vehicle safe. Undeployed airbags can cause severe injury to us, and they'll slam us into our patients. Buildings, if they're not stable, I'm thinking of 9/11 right now, got to be very careful. How about earthquakes and aftershocks? Thinking about all the sharp objects in some of those situations, especially during a motor vehicle accident. Are you looking for these things? Are you calling that out to your partner? Do you have a pair of heavy leather gloves, or maybe you have firefighting gloves when you're going onto scenes that have a lot of sharp objects? It's okay to have your exam gloves on the inside and then put on those heavier gloves, because your exam gloves are not work gloves. They will rip in an instant. Probably some of the jankiest hazards are animals. And the jankiest animal is flippin' Chihuahua. At least it has been in my experience. The smaller the animal, the more unpredictable they are. But you got to think about this. Are there cows or steer or whatever walking around on the road, or horses we had one time? Or are we going to get kicked or bitten or even trampled? What are we doing here, and are we secure? And is the patient in a place where we can get to them, or do we have to call animal control, right? We also need to talk about environmental conditions as far as assessing the scene. Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is it bright, hot, sunshine, heavy, humid, right? We need to make them normal. Warm if it's cold outside, cold if cool if it's warm outside. And we make sure that we are being very dry. We don't want any place where there's wet. That's a great place for bacteria and bad things to kind of percolate. But think about this. If you're operating in the dark, do you have your emergency lights on? If you're working in the dark, do you have enough scene lights to see what you're doing? These are things that you've got to consider as you're going onto your scenes. And then finally, you may or may not work with water rescue, ice rescue, confined space, these kind of things, but you may once in a while be called out to assist with those at other departments. Whatever the case, unless you're trained, you don't do that. And never go into a situation unless you have the right equipment. If you know what I'm saying? You don't just go storming in there with you and yourself and Irene. Okay? So, a couple of slides of summary. Stress is normal. It's a normal part of our lives. It doesn't mean it controls us, but it is a normal part. Please remember the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Stress management consists of recognizing and preventing your critical stress. Okay? Maybe we can reduce it a little bit too. Remember that during our resource management, that each member of the team is responsible for maintaining awareness in the situation and making sure to share with the team leader, hey, I don't think this is going well. Maybe we should change some things. Make sure that you remember that there are airborne and bloodborne diseases. And how are you going to keep yourselves safe from that? And finally, as you arrive to a scene of a collision or an illness, you need to make sure that you're assessing the scene for hazards of all kinds, because you don't want to be part of the problem. You're there to help.